Hey, 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 I'm Michelle.
And I'm Gretta.
We are girlfriends who have always been seekers. We love learning, sharing, and most of all, we love having those soul-to-soul moments with our girlfriends.
Our podcast is about spiritual connection and sisterhood. You are not alone. So grab your glass, get comfy, and join us as we make some noise, light up the room, and
Get into it. Hello, sisters. We're super excited to be talking about spirituality for so many different reasons. And one of those reasons is that when Gretta and I first met and really had this moment where we knew we were each other's girl, was we were literally sitting at a winery amongst a bunch of friends. And the topic of Eckhart Tolle came up. And she and I had both had some experience reading this book and just started to get into this deep conversation amongst all the other conversations that were happening. And I think in that moment, we just realized, okay,
we just become best friends.
It was one of those moments for sure. So here we are today doing a podcast together, which is so fun and exciting. And we've shared so many stories that we've experienced throughout our life that have to do with spirituality. Whether that was our upbringings, religious backgrounds, other just deep connections.
Out of this world kind of stuff.
Yes, like, light flickering kind of moments, that kind of thing. And so, we're literally sitting here together holding some stones, and Gretta is going to explain a little bit about, I guess, how we even started today. So before we even jumped on our mics, we had our own little ceremony ritual. It was just awesome. So I'm turning it over to you.
So I was on my way out the door and had this thought, I should grab my book, Ceremony by Brianna Wiest. I've used it as a tool. I meditate and then I'm just sort of guided to open it up to a page. I think thoughts come to you for a reason. I think sometimes they're outside of you. It's spirit speaking to you. So the fact that I was running out the door, I was already 10 minutes late, shocker, and went back in the house to grab this book and these stones. And I knew Michelle would be all for it. So we sat on the ground. Michelle led us in a breathing exercise, which I feel so honored and lucky to that she can share her gifts with all her knowledge when it comes to mind, body, spirit, healing.
Can we actually just take a moment to take a breath right now? There are moments in the day where we just all need to stop and take a breath. So let's just do that real quick.
Okay.
Just breathing in through the nose and exhaling slowly through the mouth. And that's called a cleansing breath. So feel free to do that at any point in time throughout your day, but just nice deep breath in through the nose and exhaling out through the mouth. Okay.
Oh, it's such a good reminder. And every time you bring that up, I realize how desperately my body needs it. So each of us said our intention for what we wanted and sort of like a question or a prayer. And then we each opened it up. And mine was so funny because it wasn't even an actual page. It was actually the sleeve of the book. And it says, I'll just read it for you because I was like, ooh, shoot. I must have not been really connecting and I must have done something wrong, but it was actually perfect. So my question to put out there into the universe was just, how can I be used to benefit this podcast and this episode of spirituality in the best way? And this is what it said. Ceremony is a collection for those on the cusp of becoming. It is a reminder that we are not meant to fit into this world perfectly, but live in such a way that we might forge a path all our own. It is a reminder that we are one with each other and nature itself. It is a reminder that we hold within us the latent potential of every future possibility we can conceive of. It is a reminder that we often must release what is not ours in order to receive what is, that we are all born with a unique imprint to leave upon the world, and that self-love is not infatuation, but a homecoming. It said, I am on the right path. I am all the things already. There's nothing I need to do. I just need to accept that my unique imprint and what I am doing is going to have a benefit. I don't need to have outside sources.
And that's what's so fun is that you can find all these different tools and resources and fun ways to deepen the thoughts that you're already having and maybe even get some clarity around how you need to go forward into the world or some clarity around just sitting still where you are. Sometimes we need those little reminders or signs. So before I read mine, I do want to preface with this great quote from a French philosopher. I really don't know how to pronounce his name. It's going to be in the show notes. You can look that up. But here is his quote. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And I really do feel that this is the way that we come into the world. We are spiritual beings. And we'll get into this a little more later, but you sort of start to get shaped by your own family's beliefs, society, cultural norms, all these different things. So when going to the ceremony book, which I already loved the title of, my intention or question was, what is my purpose in what I'm doing here? I mean, I know Gretta and I were like, oh, we love sharing stories, we want to celebrate women. All those things are part of our purpose in doing this. But is there like a deeper meaning to what I'm supposed to be doing right now? And so the page I landed on was really actually more questions back to me, which is totally fine, but so much meaning deep inside. And I know as you were reading yours, Gretta, I'm like, oh, I want to talk about each one of those things so much. So we also know that this conversation on spirituality is going to be an ongoing conversation. Yes. This is not just one podcast episode. So here are the questions I received. Will your thoughts have been used to construct a new world or pick apart the ruins? Will your words have been used to lift and encourage or suppress and push away? Will your actions have been someone's glimmer of hope or proof that all is hopeless? Will you have done the boldest and most courageous thing, which is to look into your own unconsciousness to see the backdrop from which you project all else? Will you have done what most could not, which is to just simply hold space for what hurts? Though progress is slow, it exists. Evolution is the soul of all that we are. Take a deep breath.
I love it.
Take a deep breath on that. So this was so great to start with something like that, because this topic is so wide and vast and we can go in 1,000 different directions. And we will be sharing some, deep experiences that we've both had. As a matter of fact, as we were doing this, the lights in the room that we're in right now were flickering at some very profound moments that we were having, and they actually haven't flickered since. So, to me, those are moments of spirit. Those are moments of just signs.
Well, you looked at me and you said, I think someone's trying to connect with us.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think it's good to pay attention to those things. I think there's a lot more happening than what we can see. And I think it's sort of naive to think that what we can see is all there is. I truly believe there's a possibility that our senses are not capable of seeing and feeling and touching it all. And there is more if you're open to it.
And there's even that sense of your gut and intuition. And a lot of times, I think when we're thinking about the main 5 senses, seeing, smelling, tasting, all those things, we know what they are. But there really should be the intuition sense. And I know for me, I have always had very strong premonitions about certain things, and they haven't always been super defined. So I don't get a feeling or a thought or an intuitive sense. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can save somebody's life. It's not like that, but I get these, moments, these downloads, I guess you can call them, where it's like, oh my gosh, I think something's going to catch on fire. And I can't tell you, why or pinpoint, but all of a sudden there will be an experience where something has caught on fire. I'll give you an experience. There was a week where all week long I kept having this strong sense that something was going to catch on fire. Could not figure out what it was. We go through the week, nothing has happened. Well, on a Friday, we took the kids to this sort of theme park in our town, and they're riding on the go-karts. And I looked at my husband and I'm like, okay, if one go-kart crashes into the other, could it explode and something catch on fire? And he's like, could it happen? Sure. The chances of it happening? No. Okay, so we leave the theme park. Everybody's safe. Everything's fine. Later that evening, we go to a friend's house. And, normally I would enter the house and, hey, I'll have a glass of wine, ready for the party. And this particular day, I felt like, no, I'm going to walk in with coffee. I feel like someone's going to have to go to the ER. Again, I had no idea what is happening right now. Sure enough, Moments later, I go to walk outside and I see my husband pull his hand away from a heat lamp that had actually the hose that brings the gas to, I guess, ignite the flame had detached. So there was a flame at the end of this hose. When he also had looked up at one point and saw that something wasn't right, he went to go turn the propane tank off. And just as his hand was in there, he didn't know, but gas was leaking out. So that flame came down and lit the whole thing on fire. And so he pulls his hand out and he's got a flame dancing on his hand. And of course, you can only imagine everybody's freaking out. He had to go to ER. And so I could not, prevent that from happening.
No.
But that strong sense, that intuition of something is going to catch on fire, someone's going to the ER, just, to me, that's spirit. That is something more than what I can
and I think it's
explain.
Psychic. You haven't developed it all the way. I think we all have gifts, and I've read that many times. We all are psychic. It's just how much you develop it or how much you've lost from growing up. When you're little, you are born with being able to see and feel these things and having that strong intuition, and it's like taught out of you. And I think especially growing up Catholic, there was fear around it. So if you saw something, it must be evil. It must be bad. So you really didn't want to ever see anything. So you really shut it down.
Totally. And what came up on that page also that I read, which I didn't share the entire page because it's really long and you all don't want me just reading books to you. It said something about like wisdom and wickedness is sort of like always present. And I think that we're always looking at things and trying to figure out like what is a threat and what is good or a lesson in something. And for sure in Catholicism, I remember being taught from a very young age that anything that sort of had to do with, there was a lot of evil spirit type stuff that you have to pay attention to.
Right. There was no in between. It was very black and white.
Right. And even though when we think about the Holy Trinity in Catholicism, it's like God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So those were some things that I also questioned growing up. Like, wait, but I'm feeling these things and no one's really, and you know what? Even being young, I don't remember anyone really talking to me deeply about the Holy Spirit. It was more like God the Father and Jesus. Yes, you heard the term, but for me personally, I didn't walk away with a strong sense of what the Holy Spirit was. And it wasn't until I went on my own kind of spiritual journey, which at the time I wouldn't even call it that. It was just, hey, I'm asking some questions. I'm having some experiences. I'm kind of deep diving into the meaning of life and who God is. And some things surfaced at that time. And little did I know that that would probably be really the beginning of this spiritual awakening, I guess I would call it in reflection now. So,
and how old were you when that was starting for you?
So when I was about 15, my grandmother passed away. And that is really when I kind of asked the question, why do bad things happen to good people? This was somebody so full of joy and so full of life, and the nurturer of the family, the caretaker for everyone. Just happiness, this ball of happiness and joy. That's when I started questioning, who is God? If you can take babies from moms and you can take these people who are actually providing amazing value in the world, you're almighty and powerful. How does that happen? But no one really said anything back to me that satisfied that. So that's really when I got angry with God. I am not anti-Catholicism because I really do believe that every different religion or whatever your spiritual practice is, that is what works for you. But for me personally, as I went on this spiritual journey, I needed to find some answers as to why, who is God really? So it was an unfolding actually, but I did all my sacraments. So even after that happened with my grandmother, I still went on to, get married in a Catholic church. And part of that too was driven again by, this is what we do in our family and this is what's going to make everybody happy. It wasn't.
I almost describe it as like it's a part of your culture.
Yes.
It's not just religion. It's I would say like if someone says I'm Italian, it actually never felt like a choice to me. It was just like, this is who you are. So to question it, it's not even conceivable. So that was a big deal that you had that at 15.
For sure. Now, I will also add that I have probably always been just a little bit more rebellious by nature, or let's call it curiosity, like, why are we doing this? I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. Somebody explain. But I think it's also good to question, because I have watched others get into religions where they're like, hey, give up, all your jewelry and your CDs back in the day, and everything you believe in, or just have fun with, like get rid of all the fun. And it was like, wait, what? Like I'm turning my soul and everything I love.
God wants us to enjoy life. Yeah.
He is love, right?
Mm-hmm.
After I had my son and I joined a master's degree program, and one of the first classes I took was about world religions. And that was very mind blowing to me, because there were so many religions that I didn't even know existed. And there were some definite common threads throughout all of them. Be a good person, love. Some of those things were present throughout. But then there were some other, and I wouldn't even call them religions, even though they were put in this class, but it was more of like ways of living your life. So for example, like Taoism. And Taoism is all about balance. You've heard of like the yin and yang. It's all about 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. To me, that made sense. I resonated with that so much. And then I heard a little bit about Buddhism, and there were some things there that I resonated with. Then I heard about Sufism, and it's like, oh, well, hold on a minute. All these things were so fascinating to me that I just decided that I was going to go on this exploration. So I wasn't going to, quote unquote, attach myself to one thing. It was like, yes, Catholicism is part of how I was raised. Yes, I've had some spiritual experiences, not just intuition type stuff, but like other things. And then, yes, I need more answers, and I'm going to look at everything, because I feel like I needed all that knowledge to really feel secure in what spiritual practice I was going to follow.
Yeah, I think you were really in tune and you were searching, and how wonderful that you did not put yourself in a box and deny yourself that exploration. You were very open-minded.
Yes. Throughout that process, my husband actually really kind of dove into Christianity. And when he first invited me to go to church with him, I was a little bit resistant in the very beginning, but then I thought, you know what? Okay, that open-mindedness, that I've always sort of had, and that curiosity was like, well, you know what? I've never been to a Christian church. Let me go check it out. And I will say, there were things that felt very normal and grounding to me because of the Catholic upbringing. But then there were some things that kind of scared the shit out of me. I was like, wait, what do you mean you can just like have a donut and bring it into church? What? Everyone just wears like whatever they want, and they're drinking coffee up in here. I mean, I'd ask for a piece of gum in church, and it was like, don't let anyone know you're chewing gum, Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is kind of fun, Yeah. But one thing that has been in my journey is this trigger to music. And I have found that when I sit in a church, and it doesn't matter what denomination it is, the minute the music starts, and it could be kind of high rock and roll Christian music, or it can be this old fashioned hymn, but all of a sudden I get this overpowering emotion to just cry. And that was
experienced that.
Have you?
Steve and I have experienced that in a church in Mexico. They only were speaking Spanish, and we do not speak Spanish. And we both just started bawling. So I believe that your spirit is connecting, even if you don't have the ability to understand the words.
Right. Yes. And that's part of the spiritual experience, right? Is that sometimes you just feel things and there's no explanation. And I mean, I'll be straight up honest. I don't love listening to Christian music at home. I don't love walking into a Catholic church and listening to the hymns. I think the vibrations of what the messages that they hold are probably so powerful. And that's what I resonate with.
Yeah. Your soul connects to it.
Yes. It's a soulful feeling. It's a whole body experience that happens.
Part of what I kind of hear you saying is that there is spirituality in religion. Like, religion is not bad. Just because you can find spirituality in other ways, it exists there too. And it's just what speaks to you and what do you need, and following that. I watched my mother for years. She was going through a horrible, horrible time in her life where my dad had abandoned us, and she really relied on the Catholic Church. And she found some incredibly spiritual, amazing women in that church that lifted her up. But for me, I would struggle to not fall asleep. I just did not connect in that way. But for her, it was great to witness her having that foundation. And some people want the structure.
Totally. So I then have to kind of mention going to this Christian church, which, like I said, held some of those traditions that I found in the Catholic Church. So there was couple things that almost felt like home. But at the same time, a friend of mine had asked me if I wanted to go to school to become a yoga instructor. And I was like, what? No, I don't think I'm going to be teaching anyone yoga. I'm struggling to even have a practice. I'm super tight in my body. None of this sounds fun. And you got to make it exciting for me. So she found this program and it was local. So I said, fine, go ahead, sign me up. 200 hours later, this piqued a whole other thing inside of me.
It was like in probably 2005.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I didn't even really hear about yoga that much back then. I mean, I did, but it wasn't something that was so mainstream the way it is now.
It wasn't in schools, like, at least in the Bay Area, right, where we're from. No. So it was still kind of brand new even for me. So we did the class, and from there, I just needed to know more. I needed to know more about the body. I needed to know more about, spirit, mind, and all these things. And so my husband encouraged me to go to massage therapy class and to become certified. And again, I was like, oh, yeah, I am not.
I know why he wanted you to become certified in that.
Exactly. So the initial, response was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to become a massage therapist. No. But then
he's like, you can practice on me.
Of course, I found a massage therapy program. And oh my gosh, like when I walked in there, I was now amongst people who were like psychics and energy healers. And even though there was a curiosity, I mean, that still scared the shit out of me because I'm like, I don't know. This kind of feels
supposed to be evil.
It's supposed to be evil. And then I just started just paying attention. I became the observer, the questioner, the experiencer. So I had some experiences of my own that again was like, oh, I'm feeling this energy in my hands. I'm not even touching someone's body.
Wow.
Like, what is this? Why is this person crying as I put my hands over their heart? Why is this person wincing when my hands are around their head, which, after you come out of a session, you talk about it. And there were sharings of, oh, somebody beat me over the head with a bottle once. And literally I could feel this energy coming out of her head.
Traumas.
Yeah, the trauma, like just trying to exit. And whoa, talk about getting deep in some spiritual experiences. You are working with people's energy fields where they are vulnerable. And when you can get into that space where you can quiet everything down and really just be so in tune with energy around you.
We are energy. If you look at it that way, it makes sense.
Absolutely. And energy has to go somewhere. Look at it from a science perspective. It might change form or, move.
Never dies.
It just doesn't
change form.
Die. Yeah. So that's a little bit about my background. So I know your background, Gretta, like there's some similarities.
Well, you were just getting to the good part that I wanted to hear about, but we'll get back to that. I'm not letting you off the hook.
We'll come back.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar. I grew up very traditional Catholic. I was a good little Catholic girl. I did all the things too.
All your sacraments.
All my sacraments.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah.
Because that's how you elevate and get more. Like you can actually get like
a video
crackers, and wine in church. Like you got to go through all those classes and then you can have all that.
Yes. And I actually really enjoyed it also. I like tradition, and I think it was all a good experience to have had growing up. And it really shut me off from all that there is. I mean, I think it would have been great to have been exposed to other world religions. And the older I get, the more curiosity I have around that, because I do think if you look at the core of all of them, there is the same thread kind of runs throughout. And I believe that it is just how you receive it is what you're drawn to. So what you need, you will search for, and hopefully you will find if you're open and curious enough. For me, though, being a Catholic was not really such a spiritual experience. It was more of just something that I did with my family. And at a certain point, when things started going sideways in my life in my early 20s, I almost became more agnostic than anything. I just really wasn't grounded in anything, and things were just hard. And so I lost faith that maybe there isn't even a God that's looking out for me, because it really doesn't feel like it right now. My husband, someone had just fallen off the top of a 20-foot ladder, landed on him while I was pregnant with our daughter, our first child. So it was just really dark. I call it the dark ages. Everything was a struggle. Nothing went as we had planned. Before that time, I would say I was a big planner of my life, and I really felt very in control of my life. It was not a lot of faith or hope. And I loved watching Oprah, and I heard of this book called A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Michelle was saying that was the book that kind of drew us together. And I knew that I needed to read this book. Oprah was saying, you read this book, you'll never be the same. It's going to change your life. And I knew I needed to change my life. Things were not good. And it took me, I think, like 4 years before I actually went to the bookstore and bought this dang book.
But it came for you probably when maybe you were ready to receive it.
So Oprah said, you will not read this. You will not read this book until you are ready to change your life. And I must have been ready. And I am telling you, I've talked to other people that have tried to read the book and really struggled with it. For me, it was like this little bit of just nourishment at the beginning of every day with my coffee, sitting in the backyard. I would just read a couple pages at a time, or sometimes I'd go off on a tangent, but it really became like this nourishment for my soul that I needed and craved. And it gave me a different perspective on life. I made decisions about my life that I was not going to be the victim of things that had happened to me in the past. And I was going to move forward, and kind of like the passage that you got in ceremony today, like you can make the choice of your perspective on things. Are you going to build from the rubble, or are you going to crumble with it and live in it? It really gave me that power to step into my strength and move forward, and incredible things started happening in my life, like beyond incredible things. And I can't even get into all of it right now, but my life changed quickly. And I never realized you could get that from a book. I had read the Bible when I was in middle school from front to back. I had a strong connection with the Blessed Virgin Mary. I think it was the feminine power that I was really drawn to, but nothing had really changed my life so drastically as the information that I found in A New Earth.
I think when you're on these spiritual journeys, or don't even know you're on the spiritual journey, but just when you start paying more attention in general, wisdom comes to you.
The book actually ties the different spiritual leaders, and they were all doing the same thing. They were all teaching us to love one another. And my son had this amazing, I had this amazing experience. I witnessed my son at 3 years old. He woke up and he just said, Mom, we're all just here to love each other. That's all. And I was like, what? Where are you? What are you saying? Why did you say that just now out of nowhere? And It just purely from God.
When we think about kids too, going back to these little souls that come into the world with so much wisdom and knowledge, and we wonder, where did all this come from? I will share an experience just because I feel like it just is another example of how this works. And so the death in the family I had later on was my brother. And there was a day where I was taking my 3 kids and my niece. So it was her father who passed. She was 5. And I'm taking the kids to school, and everybody is just kind of arguing, and my niece starts crying, and her constant question was, why my dad? Like, why did this have to happen to him? And, immediately it took me back to when my grandmother died, going, why do bad things happen to good people? Because he was also one of those like amazing, just positive, joyful people in the world. And I had no words for her. All I had were tears streaming down my face. I couldn't even look in the rearview mirror to see them in the back. And I just thought, how can I support her right now? And my 4-year-old looks at her and says, but you do have a father. God is your father.
Wow.
And in that moment, like the cart still brings me to tears. Like the cart got quiet and she was that message to her, you know? And it's like, how did you explain that? She's 4. Like who would even think to say that? Nobody else had anything that was going to satisfy that question in that moment. And something came through her.
Yes.
And the message got across and everybody just sort of settled down.
Wow.
And again, it's these experiences where you go, okay, there has to be something greater. It's not just the material world. It's not the physical forms that we're in. There is so much more. I just think that there are some children who are a little bit more sensitive, just like your son is the same way. There's some children who are just a little more sensitive or in tune.
And they don't lose it all the way. Yeah.
Correct. So yeah, I mean, I think we share all this stuff because there's probably a ton of people sitting out here right now thinking of their own experiences or just kids that they've interacted with where it's like, oh my gosh, how did they know that? Or where did that come from? And so,
you have to please share just how Sophia had this even before you met her, like physically met her. You were pregnant with her or you were trying to get pregnant with her at that time?
So circling back to massage school, I was working with a student and he did share with me that he was an energy worker. And at that time, I really didn't even understand what he was saying to me, but I'm like, okay, that's cool. So he, did his work. And when he was done with the treatment, he looked at me and said, after class, would you mind staying back a bit so I can share some things with you? And I'm like, yeah. Oh no, what did he find? And piqued that little bit of fear. So I waited and he said to me, okay, you are going to get pregnant and you are going to have a girl. Somebody died that was close to you, female nurturing energy, an aunt or a grandma. And I was like, yes, my grandmother passed away years ago. And he looked at me and said, okay, that girl's is basically her coming back. And I'm just like, what? Well, here we go a few months later. And I do end up getting pregnant. And then when I had my daughter, she was born at 3:15 in the morning on a Saturday morning. My grandmother had passed away at 3:15 in the morning on a Saturday morning. I named my daughter before any of this happened, Sophia Renee, which come to find out means wisdom reborn.
Whoa.
And I have so many other signs and so many other stories that have to do with this connection to her and my grandmother. That's one of my stories of having a spiritual experience.
Yeah. And how can you deny that? Like that happened to you. That is your experience.
Absolutely.
And whether or not you choose to believe that for yourself is totally up to you. But when things happen to you, you cannot deny them. I was really in denial, even after reading A New Earth. I was in denial of I just didn't want to know that there was ghosts or anything spiritual that I could not see. It terrified me. And it's funny because when I look back, I can see that I had a lot of different experiences that I just chose to no, that didn't happen. I just shut it out. But this one experience in particular, I could not. It was so vivid and real. Not only did I see it, but I also heard it and I felt it. So you really can't hide from that. I was in the bathroom at my best friend's house. I was taking off my makeup. I had just put soap on my eyes and I heard this rumbling and it kind of sounded like your washing machine when it gets a little out of whack and it's really making a loud spinning noise. And I looked down the hall and nope, the washing machine is not going. That's weird. And then I look down and I see the toilet paper roll just spinning at an incredibly rapid rate all by itself. So then I look up on the bathroom counter to see if maybe my soap had fallen and landed on it and that caused it to spin, even though that wouldn't have made sense because it was spinning so rapidly. Nothing about it was normal. And my human instinct was, what the fuck, make it stop. And so I put my hand on it to make it stop. And then it shook from left to right just as rapidly.
And you didn't just like run out of the bathroom like
I tried to, but my hands were slippery from the soap.
shoot. Oh no.
It was like one of those nightmares that you have where I couldn't scream. I was so petrified. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before. And the toilet paper was just spinning rapidly again. It was not stopping. And my best friend finally came in. This was, her house, and I'm having this experience. And she's like, "Are you okay? I've never heard your voice sound like that before." And I like could not talk. And as we look down, the last little bit of toilet paper comes off of the roll. And there's this perfect pile underneath the roll where it all unraveled. And there was no explanation. And you know what? It didn't matter. If no one believed me, it happened. I experienced it. And I think that I needed to experience something like that for me to open back up to the spiritual world fully. Like I had said, I had read A New Earth and I was on that journey, but I still was, and it still was a scary experience. I mean, nothing about it was warm and fuzzy, but now knowing what I know, I don't think it was evil. When I told my mom and my grandma, very strong Catholic women, that was evil spirit. That was dark. And I'm like, well, how do you know? I don't know. I mean, yeah, the energy it felt urgent, maybe even almost angry or frustrated. I don't know, but I just didn't know what it was. And now where I'm at in my life, I can look back and think possibly it was a spirit guide trying to get my attention.
So that's exactly, I guess I was thinking like, what if at that time you really understood your understanding of spirituality was different. And so maybe the urgency was just more of like, hey, look over here versus like, because it was something you'd never experienced before. It invoked all that fear. And obviously because of past teachings of like, oh, something like that would not be, seen in a positive light. Right.
Right. Absolutely. Like, and then to have it reaffirmed by my mom and grandma too. I mean, I went home that night. I was like, I'm not sleeping here. This is...
I gotta go now.
I'm out. And then I proceeded to just lay in bed and look at the ceiling all night. I was petrified, and it was a wake up call. But I only am realizing that really just within the last couple months, so that was in 2009, and it was right when my life was really starting to change in a positive way, and I was opening up to the possibility that there is magic and things we cannot see in this world, and the darkness, the clouds were starting to separate for me. And the reason that I believe now that it could be a spiritual guide or guardian angel, whatever you want to call it, is because in March of 2020, I had an experience. Again, I have had nothing really since. I mean, there were like little things, but nothing to the gravity of what that toilet paper roll experience was until March of 2020. And it was my daughter's 16th birthday. As you know, the whole world shut down just like a week before. And so all of our plans had changed, and we had just bought a fifth wheel trailer, and we decided, well, we can't go anywhere. We can't do anything. We can't have a party. We'll just have a camp out in the driveway. And it was, it was nice to not be in our house and to be have different scenery of the trailer.
In your neighborhood.
Yes.
Safe place.
Yes. And luckily my daughter was a good sport. So we just had a lovely dinner, made her favorite cake. It was just a nice evening, and then we all went to sleep. And I was awoken suddenly out of a deep sleep by like wind blowing and leaves. And it's March, so that's not too weird. And I'm sleeping in a trailer, so things are going to sound different. But I had this gut feeling that something or someone had come into the trailer. That's the only way I can describe it. It was like the hairs on the back of my neck went up. It was this whooshing sound that came in. And there was a presence, so much so that I said, "Are you a spirit?" And the light in the bathroom of the trailer came on immediately. And then, of course, I went into pure panic mode, just like I did with the toilet paper, like all this fear. I looked at my phone and it was 3:27 and did not put things together until a week later when I was talking to my sister-in-law, and she was able to recognize that it was March 27th, 3:27 at 3:27 a.m. when this happened. And so that's odd, but I don't know what any of it means. What is 3:27? For like 2 months after this, I was being woken up at 3:27 every morning. It was definitely someone was trying to get a hold of me. And it only stopped when my husband finally said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you're going through this." And I will wake up and I will talk to it. He has no fear around any of this stuff. And actually him just waking up, it stopped happening. And I've had nothing since then around this, just the wonderment of like what it was, why did that happen? Who was it? I felt bad that I yelled at it to leave because, of course, I went into my leave in the name of Jesus thing, my Catholic upbringing. So I felt bad that I was like maybe mean. Maybe it was someone, an ancestor that wanted to talk to me, that had a message for me. I just didn't know. And just like a month ago, I was talking to one of my really good friends. I had never shared that story with her. She was so fascinated by it. That was kind of like where we left it. So that night, after our friends had gone home, I went to sleep like nothing. I get woken up out of a dead sleep at 3:27 with the thought, what if all of this was just to show you how strong you really are? And I had chills come over my body. I knew at that point that it definitely was a spirit guide, guardian angel trying to get through to me. Stop being afraid. You're not alone. You're a powerful soul. And it's like all this attempt at just trying to reach me and the patience that this spiritual guide has.
Yeah, like how many nights is it going to take?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that is why now I can look back at the toilet paper roll experience and think maybe it wasn't some dark, evil spirit. Mm-hmm. Maybe this was all just an attempt to reach me.
Sure. And give you this bigger message.
Yeah.
That you're now becoming more clear about.
It gave me another layer of understanding that I am not just this human body. I am a spirit that is very old. I think we get lots of tries to come back, and not even tries. I think it's more of like, I think I used to think that. I think now it's more of our souls need to come here to have these experiences to just grow. And it's not about like getting it right. Mm-hmm. It's just about having human experiences and getting little tidbits from each lifetime that our soul evolve.
That's an area that I'm still not sure what I believe exactly to be true. I'm not denying anything. I don't know. And there is a little bit of this fear because of, the Catholic girl and the beliefs that live within me.
Well, and I think there's also, it would be so nice to think that there's just heaven and that's the way we were raised. Like when you die, then you see everybody that you love. And I think you still do. I think there just isn't. We are so in human condition of our way of thinking about time that we don't realize that it's so much broader than this linear passage of time that we have where you live and then you die and then you go to heaven. Like that's very human condition, our understanding of the way things work. But it could be that there's multiple timelines and there's multiple things happening at the same time. We just don't know. I mean, I know I'm getting way deep and it's kind of more than I even really understand. But I am open to the fact that we may have a limited view on what truly is.
I think, well, we already know that we only tap into a small percentage of what the human brain is even capable of. And so to think of things on a more spiritual level, like you're saying, with this time continuum, when you even think about God, he's omnipresent. He's before, after, he's just always.
Right. I
remember mind blowing.
A little kid and thinking, well, when I pray, how can God hear me? Because everybody's praying to him at the same time. And
it's too many prayers.
Yes. Getting out of that concept of thinking that's just the way things are on earth, but that's not the way things are necessarily. So
we relate it to how we perceive things and what our limitations are, because we are limited. Yeah, we are limited. But I think that we definitely have the capacity to explore, and we have the capacity to grow and deepen our faith, whatever that faith for you is, whether it is kind of rooted in Christianity or something else. We all have the potential to expand our minds. We can just keep going on and on and on forever about this topic, and we will come back to it. But how do we want to leave everybody? What do we want to leave everyone with today?
This is what I almost lost it too, man. have a thought and then it goes. I think what I would like to share is something that I've learned, and maybe you've not had any kind of experience like Michelle and I have that you can't deny, that is really a blessing because it kind of pushes you forward and makes you have to acknowledge that there's more than we can see, right? But I think even if you have not had those experiences, what you can rely on is your intuition and your feelings. And if you hear something and it resonates with you and you feel it in your stomach, your solar plexus, is that right? What is that called? Yes. If you feel it, that's what I rely on. And for some reason, for me, that's where it lives. So when I hear something and I know it to be truth, and it's maybe a deep concept and something I'd never heard, but I feel it in my solar plexus. It's like a very grounded feeling of truth. I rely on that and I move forward from that place. Also, my sister-in-law opened me up to this, and I love this too. She made me aware of it. When you hear something and you get chills, there's more to that. I think I used to just brush over it like, oh, I've got goosebumps. That's funny. So now when I hear something to me that is truth, if I get goosebumps or if my eyes tear up, that's truth. That's my spirit. That's my inner spirit telling me, yes, this is true for you. And I rely on that, and I'm in tune with it. And I think the more you pay attention to it and the more you're in tune with it, and the more you're in tune with nature and the little things that nature's always speaking to you, even if you're not having a toilet paper roll spinning, you still can have spirituality and spiritual connections.
Yeah. And I think looking for those signs, like you're talking about being so present, right? That that intuition sense, like your senses are being activated.
Yeah. And think about that. What is causing that?
Right. Yeah. What is causing that? There has to be more.
I would love to just end this episode on this note, going all the way back full circle to this beautiful book ceremony. And it was kind of right around the time that Michelle and I were talking about making this podcast come to fruition. And I had a lot of mixed feelings about it because I am one that has my hands in a lot of different pots. And I did not want to look like some crazy all over the place chick, which, you know what, truth be told, I probably am. I'm trying all kinds of stuff and let's see what sticks, right? So I'm meditating and I'm terrible at it, and my mind is going in a million different directions. At a certain point, I give up. I'm like, this is going nowhere. This is just ridiculous. I got dishes to do, laundry to fold. As I'm getting up, I have this thought, and it's open the book. It was very precise and bossy, really. So I look, there's the book that's been sitting there. My thumb slips immediately in between the pages, and this is the page. If more people found the courage to share the stories within their souls, the world would be a better place. When I went into that meditation, my feeling was, I'm doing too many different things. Is this silly that I'm starting a podcast? So if more people found the courage to share the stories within their souls, the world would be a better place, was truly the answer that I needed in that moment. I felt very certain that this was a message that we needed to move forward and make this podcast happen.
And here we are.
Here we are.
Here you are listening, and it's an exciting time. And I think all of our past experiences and all the pots that we've had our hands in will totally just be a collective contribution to everything that we're talking about and people that we're connecting with, and it will all just beautifully weave together. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you liked what you heard and we're your girls,
please share and add a review on iTunes so we can continue to grow our circle. You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at That's My Girl Podcast.